Again, welcome. And as I mentioned, so what we have here is we have Tim Weber, Vice President at Batesville Products. We have Jeff Reed, who is our automation engineer here at Batesville Products. You have myself, who will be kind of hosting everybody, asking some questions, getting the chat going around at the table here. We have Jeff Schmidt, Jeff Wright, and Jeff Graham, all from NEFF. Jeff Schmidt is a robot specialist, Jeff Wright, a key account manager, and Jeff Graham is a product manager here. So a lot of expertise in the room today on automation, on robots, and on how they're implemented in the manufacturing setting. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started here.
So our last webinar of the year, and I think we've also mentioned Jeff Reed, our last webinar of the year. We appreciate everybody for these first time around. I think we did pretty well, and we appreciate everybody's input. You're in for a good one today. These guys are they're experts. They're just experts in the field, and I know that word's overused, but more important, they're curious and they're enthusiastic. So those things are really important when we do these webinars, and just getting to know them. I think you guys would enjoy being here, and you are here. So let's get it going. Let's get with the first one. So why automate? What's the reason people are automating now?
Well, I mean, at this point in time, there's such a large labor shortage. We're seeing it in just about every industry, every type of position, and it's really top down. It could be managers, it could be engineers, it could be operators, maintenance. So we focus obviously with automation robotics on the operator level. And there was a time when I think people saw robots as possibly taking people's jobs, just like when we went to automated gas stations, the guy pumping the gas tank, gas wasn't doing it anymore, went off to do something else. So what we've really enjoyed with the collaborative robot products that we're specialized in is that in most cases we're redeploying people or we're giving them assistance. We're having the robot do the heavy lifting and letting the person use their brain, use their hands, their eyes, the things that human beings are good at versus just repetitive motions and strain and those types of things.
So the efficiencies improved in cycle time is because they're just, some of these we're looking at are not necessarily lightning speed stuff, but the efficiencies are picked up. Where's that at? Where's that happen?
Like Jeff said, they're being an aid to all your employees.
Okay.
So where you have the repetitive motions and you run into your ergonomic issues and somebody has to take a break because they're taking this grinder and they're polishing a part or manhandling a part all day long, the robot doesn't get tired on that. So, that efficiency there lets them focus on doing your inspection, do your quality checks where the robot is taking over that repetitive motion and eliminating your ergonomic issues.
Yeah, safety and ergonomics, big features.
Yeah, and we do have direct, replacement or redeployment where the robot will just take over the job and it'll run. Sometimes we're even running lights out. It's getting to be more and more common to where there's no operators, there's nobody around. Maybe the robot's hooked up or the automation's hooked up to some kind of a, help me with the word, where it can contact people via email or
different
like a SCADA system,
your SCADA systems, your MES systems. All the robots can easily tie in and notify the different personnel on what they need.
And so, just to speak to that, it's really application dependent, whether we're assisting or we're redeploying or some combination of. Maybe it's taking a 3 or 4 CNC machines and having one operator instead of 4 and having that person kind of manage the robot, so to speak. But it really comes down to there's just a lot of ways to solve these issues, and then there's some applications we just can't solve. Actually, I would say it's more than we can. So you look for those low-hanging fruit opportunities where you can get a quick win, and you kind of learn from there. But I guess I'd add one thing. This technology we have here today didn't exist 8 years ago. So we weren't selling robots that anybody could program off the street, or that we didn't have to put a cage around. That was very new. It was disruptive. The mobile robots, AGVs have been around for a long time, but now we've got mobile robots that are like self-driving cars. We map the facility. So all this is new. You know, there's robots have been around for 50 years.
Right.
But this newer disruptive technology is creating more opportunities for success.
I guess real quick,
Yeah.
what are we looking at here? So maybe tell us
Sure.
about that.
Do you care if I do it?
Yeah.
I've been talking about it. But by the way, Jeff Schmidt started last week with us,
Right.
but he has 12 years of integration experience. So I figured he could program a collaborative robot if he could program the big guys. So so this is a universal robot. And this is our small one. We needed a small one to fit in the screen. So we have 4 sizes: 3 kilogram, 5 kilogram, 12.5 kilogram. They bumped it up earlier this year, and then 16, and different reach sizes as well. But the general consistency across that offering is these are considered collaborative robots, or as people will call them, cobots. The real difference between a cobot and a traditional robot is really, well, with a universal robot cobot is the ease of programming.
Mhm.
It puts the ability to program, puts the ability to maintain, puts the ability to redeploy into the hands of the facility. So you don't have to have a robot specialist that's minding that system. So it doesn't mean you don't have a robot specialist, but it does mean they can go home at night. And maybe the maintenance team on third shift can still be trained to do a joint replacement or touch up a point. Whereas with traditional robotics, that might not be the case. The other side note is they do have the ability to run unguarded. We have these running next to people in many cases. We also have them running with cages around them, just like traditional. So that comes down to a risk assessment, but it just opens up more opportunities. You know, we had a painting application a few years ago at an automotive manufacturing facility. We needed to paint the inside of the wheel well. And they use another brand of robot, and they weren't really interested in UR until they realized that they didn't have to put a cage around this. Their paint area did not have the room for a full caged up system. So we got that win, and now that customer has become one of our top customers. They still use traditional robotics, but they're also using collaborative robots.
Real quick, I have a question. This is just what we were talking about right before we started the webinar. We were talking about the supply chain interruption. Are these tough to get? Are they available?
In the world of robotics right now, they're not tough to get. Before the supply chain issue, we were looking at 1 to 2 week lead times from Denmark. These are manufactured in Denmark. They've gone out to 4 to 6 weeks since then, but we're hearing anywhere from 32 to 52 weeks for some of our competitors. So it's kind of nice. Universal robots, Mir, a couple of other product lines we offer are all owned by a US Fortune 500 name called Teradyne, and Teradyne started with semiconductor testing equipment. So I'm guessing the reason we're not running out of chips is they must have some connections there. So we've been fortunate. We probably can't get any more robots this year because we're 3 weeks out, but we have a few in stock.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If anybody wants one.
Yeah.
So Jeff, I like the word you keep using, and I think it's big still in the manufacturing market. A lot of people are out there thinking robots are going to replace or take their jobs, and you keep using the word redeploy. So what we've seen here is a lot of different need for, I guess, job function, or different need, as far as being able to program. So I think that word redeploy is very important, especially with today's market where we're having a lot of job openings, a lot of availability. Are you guys seeing that same thing? Are you guys seeing it assist in the job market out there today, where there's X amount of people looking for jobs, and there's even more that are open there?
Yeah, absolutely. So where this robot really shines is mundane tasks.
Okay.
So when you have a person doing a mundane task all day, that's really where we could use something like this.
Okay.
And we could redeploy that person into something a little bit more important, where a human could really shine. Right. So having a human do the mundane task when there's other things that could be done doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So that's really where this fits in.
Awesome.
And I've also seen the robots like this really help with employee retention, because you can take somebody that was doing this mundane task that is constantly thinking in the back of their mind, man, I'm going to go somewhere else and get a better job. Well, now you can easily take them, somebody that's been with you for 10, 15 years, doing an awesome job finishing, knows what they're looking at. You can quickly teach them how to use this arm and let them feel more involved in the process and more involved in the company, by having this value add, and now they can impart their knowledge into the process and let the robot do it.
And I think that's the key too, when you're talking about that first point there of decreases heavy labor too. So if you're not doing this mundane tasks anymore and you're trying to eliminate that heavy labor, I mean, you're getting rid of injuries or getting away from injuries, getting rid of, you know, a lot of those mundane tasks that you guys are talking about.
Yep, absolutely.
Great. I know Tim already brought one up, but let's take a look at some examples here.
You want to talk about this one?
Yeah, sure. Here we have the saw robot, which is taking care of the castings, getting ready for the machining process. We utilize different size blades, different RPMs, and that is classified as an industrial robot with a high payload. That could be done with a collaborative. In this case here, we have full guarding. Not something you would really want to do without the proper protection, but it is definitely a time saver. The people that would be doing this in place of the robot would be standing in front of a bandsaw, manhandling parts, and that would get very old after 8 to 10 hours.
So yeah, not just the labor, because that's, you know, the foundries have used robots way back because of the danger issue.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we dabbled in it years ago, but, you know, now fully embracing it, but, you know, that safety part of it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. The other thing is it's like a pre-machining operation too. It's so much more accurate. So now they go to the machine, to our machine shop, and they've got much repeatable cuts, you know. So that's a key.
Yeah, and I think you state a couple here, reduces labor and danger, but in reality too, it reduces some of the cost for your customer as well, because you're getting into the robotic side of things, and you said it's more accurate. You're coming in here and doing close to, or if not, machining cuts, and reducing scrap potential from, you know, taking a manual operation and sawing into a potential part. So you see a lot of different benefits here, you know, from an industrial sized robot as well. But as Jeff mentioned, there is the possibility to use it in correlation with a cobot as well.
Yeah, you could definitely do the cobot application with this. The guarding would be important because of the saw blade and the potential dangers, the risk involved. And for some people, they don't understand risk assessment. It's basically a legal document that you're stating what type of injuries could occur, severity of the injury. You're putting numbers on it, and you're basing your process or your design of your process to that risk assessment.
Great. Cool. Just want to give everybody a reminder, if you do have any questions, make sure you're dropping it in that chat section or in the questions section. We'll be sure to get them answered for you guys.
All right, this is one we're on right now. You want to talk about this one, Jeff? This is your baby.
This is another industrial robot. This one will be handling heavy parts, end effectors, specifically to handle specific parts. We have a grinding, sanding attachment. Actually, it's a pedestal, dual belt. Unfortunately, there's no belts in the picture here, but we would present the part to the belt for the sanding operation. Person there doing the programming, a little bit more involved with this type of robot, language specific. The favor of the Cobots is they are so easy to program that the same person was able to do things with the Cobot application that they could not do without more training on this type of a robot, on an industrial robot. So there's a lot of advantages to the smaller robots. Unfortunately, again, in this example, due to the complexity of the parts and the weight, it kind of rules out the Cobot for this application.
So Tim, where would you see maybe this polishing robot? What kind of work would you see being put on something like this versus the Cobot? So you guys stayed here, it makes polishing, heavier parts a lot easier. So are there parts that are more likely to be on that machine versus, a Cobot type instance?
The thing I like about this is, we can play around with what the finish is. So that part might stay on there. It might start off, just traditionally you start out with an 80 grit and a 120, 240, something like that. And then we go to a heavy duty manual buff. What if we could run through a couple more belts and get it almost to a buff without it leaving the cell? We've got a great guy down there, and he's just built like a linebacker who's our only buffer left, and those guys, that's a tough job. Now you do something like this and you make it, well, now this is manageable. It's got more ops, but it never leaves the cell. It's just the different things that we can do inside that cell using, repetitive motion. We're not worried about wearing somebody out.
And along the same lines with this, we're currently we're breaking the ice on the collaborative robot, deburring, sanding as a post-operation coming out of our machining ops. And we're going to rely heavily on the collaborative robots due to the ability to be next to people, still be in a safe environment. The ability to handle the separate tools, the tool changer packages are easy to use, easy to implement. That will be, along with these industrial robots, there's going to be a lot of small robots coming up to help the people. It's going to open up a lot of opportunities for us.
Yeah, and interestingly, we're in the midst of partnering with actually two companies that are partnering together, and then we're going to represent. So that, I mentioned earlier the ease of programming. I mean, that's really been the secret sauce of Universal Robots' success. I can't say every Cobot on the market has that feature, but that's definitely been what's driven this over the years. I used to joke they even let me program it, and I'm the business unit manager, so I have no business programming anything. So we've actually got and I can't name names yet because contracts haven't been signed, but there is a key traditional industrial robot company that's now partnering with a software company to come up with a easy to use front end, very similar to the Universal Robot front end. So now it doesn't have to just be a 16 kilogram or 12 kilogram. We could be doing 300 kilogram, or I don't know, what do they go up to, Jeff? 1,000? Yeah. 300, I guess. I'm like, man, that's a lot. That's like 10 times more than we're doing 20. So the thing I always tell people, of course, we didn't really introduce ourselves, but NEFF is an industrial automation distributor. We cover about 14, 15 states, depending what product line. We're one of many UR partners in the United States. We're one of many MIR partners, and I could go on and on with our line card. Things change every day, and as a high-tech distributor, we're always being approached. We have a new type of robot sitting on our floor right now from Switzerland, but we were approached because of our Universal Robot experience. My point is if you have partners like this, or you're looking for partners like this, finding a Universal Robot distributor in your area is going to probably get you in with the company that's going to be on the leading edge. When new companies come, new products come, they come finding us. So, and what we had last week, what we couldn't do last week, we can do next week. It's really changing. The terrain is changing daily. It's hard for me to keep up, and it's my job. So.
Well, in the automation world, where your imagination ends is where the possibilities end. If you wake up in the middle of the night, it's kind of a joke, but there's a lot of truth to this. You wake up in the middle of the night and it's like, oh my God, why didn't I think of that yet earlier? And, we've seen the commercials, the Hewlett Packard shower moment, or I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express, those commercials. There's a lot of truth to that with automation. It's, you run into a problem before the collaborative robots were available. How can I solve this problem? These things have opened the door to so much that it's amazing, and it's going to grow. It's going to become more prevalent. And anyone that's looking to get into this from an automation standpoint, take a look at the URs, because they truly do have the software that is easy to implement. The UR Academy on the web, a lot of information in there. They're leading. they're not following, they're leading.
They are the Kleenex of collaborative robots. I mean, there was no such thing as a collaborative robot before Universal Robot introduced this into, oh gosh, I forget what year it was, 2008, I think. We're on our 4th generation of robot. You know, we had, of course, just like anything else new, there was an issue here and an issue there. We got through them, we learned from them, and this E-series that we're currently promoting has been very solid. And it's really just a matter, like you said, I love that, the imagination. The other thing I used to like to say is taking a leap of faith. If you've never used automation before, and you know this sales guy comes in and he's got a good way of talking, and he tells you all these things that sound like too good to be true, but you're looking at a $30, $40, $50,000 investment. You've never done it before, so really be careful who you partner with. There's lots of ways we can help you. You know, if you're on your first project, we can help you with simulations. We can help you with test and trials. Now, if it's a pick and place on a CNC machine, we've done that 1,000 times. We'd like you just to watch the video and believe us. But if you're doing something special, we're you know, I know ourselves and other distributors are willing to do that, because our customer base for UR is broken down the line 50%. 50% of the customers have never used a robot before. So they're really having to take a leap of faith. They're the owners, their business managers are making a large investment in something they've never done. Now, the other 50% are the folks that are already using a traditional 6-axis robot, but they will continue, just like DPI with what we looked at earlier.
Right.
But they're looking for something innovative. They're looking for something post-process. They're looking for something to enable operators. You know, we were talking about the linebacker,
Right.
and you mentioned he's probably going to retire soon. And I said, well, what if he could be running a robot instead of standing there all day sanding? How long would he retire? And you know, I mean, we'd have to ask him, but I'd like to think that, you know, you take somebody out of that highly intensive labor job and let them manage this pretty blue robot, and the next thing you know, they're wanting to stay longer.
Yeah, and how much travel knowledge does he have?
Yeah, you don't want to lose him.
You can't lose him.
Yeah, but he's tired.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, we all, I worked at UPS, I got tired too.
Yeah.
So it's you know, it's interesting. Just, I love the imagination thing. You know, how do we keep our workforce? How do we keep people wanting to come to work every day?
You know, people get excited. I mean, when they're learning something new, I mean, it doesn't matter what level you are for the company. I mean, people want to do a good job, and they can say, look, I can do this. I can gain this skill set. I mean, that's going to help with retention. I mean, a lot of people want to progress through companies and work their way up. You know, and another thing with this that I don't think we've really hit on is the redeployment. You know, just because you purchase the robot for one application, you know, if you lose that product line or that, you know, system, you can easily take this and redeploy it. You know, so don't look at, well, you know, we may only have this for another year or whatever. Get the robot in there and use it in that application and then move it. I mean, tooling's cheap. I mean, you're going to change the fingers and, like I said, move it to a different part style.
We put probably 30% of our systems are on rolling carts or rolling pedestals, and people will, so let's say you have a machine that, you know, runs on first shift 3 days a week, and then you got another one that runs the other 3 days, and then you maybe got another one that runs on second. I mean, I'm making things up, but we've seen this where they'll move it from machine to machine, and that's how they get the return on investment. Because even though I would say return on investment isn't as important today as it was a few years ago, because it's hard to find people, you certainly want to be able to pay for the equipment. With this type of product, because you can program it yourself, you can integrate it yourself. You know, a traditional robot cell is going to typically cost anywhere from $150,000 up to $1 million. If you were to pick up a UR10, for example, it's a $50,000 robot. Maybe you got another $10,000 worth of stuff, tooling, grippers, rolling base. You're at 60 grand. Your operators are probably costing $40,000 or $50,000 these days with overtime, because they're all working overtime. Got healthcare, you got time, people not showing up. All of a sudden, you've got that robot system paid for in just maybe less than a year, or just a little bit over a year. If you're running a couple shifts, it's less than a year. So these things pay for themselves very quickly. And then to Jeff's point, they can be redeployed, and it's something. It's an employee that's never going to leave.
Right.
Worst case scenario, you might need to send it to the hospital every now and then for a joint replacement. But what person's not gonna have that, right?
I think, I heard two pretty valid points there, and you said the comment of 50% of people who are looking at robots now haven't used them, and I'd be surprised in the foundry industry if it wasn't even lower, or I guess higher. Yeah. Because and I know the foundry industry is working really hard on that, because a lot of what people think of when they see or hear foundry industry is hot foundries and pour, dark, dirty places pouring this stuff, and really trying to, put the robotics, on a different level, because it's like you mentioned, it's cool, it's different, it's really changing the industry for sure. But I think more importantly, the second thing was the health and safety. You're talking about, sending this to the hospital to get a joint replacement or whatever that is, but really it's the health and safety of the employees here. So you mentioned, the linebacker being able to stay on even longer. What would that have done for his career had he had that, 40 years ago, because he is a 40-year employee, or somebody starting off today, and what longevity does that have in that type of person?
Well, I think, if you look at resources these days, what's really valuable? Some people would, obviously air and water is pretty important, and information's become a very tradable device. We're probably being traded right now. But people, people are our biggest resource. In the United States, we have a phenomenal workforce, and I don't believe that people are just sitting home doing nothing. I think people are looking for a better life. And if you give them a better life, they're going to stick with you. Don't you just have to stay a little more competitive than your neighbor? If you're just got a little better working environment, or you got a little better value proposition, you're going to keep the employees.
Yeah, and these guys did it right too, because this was a Kaizen event. So when they brought that, they were placing it. It was a Kaizen event. So the folks in that department, they own it, and the excitement down there was, was silly. It was just crazy, and they're not, that also is, somebody talked about employee retention. They see the company and they're doing, cutting edge stuff, and hey, this is cool, and I'm part of it, and hey, this is in my department. So the way you guys rolled it out, I think, was also very sharp and beneficial.
Well, doing this for many years, I can say I've seen more jobs created by robotics than I have seen eliminated. I have seen traditional automation without robotics. That has replaced people, but those people they just move to a different point of the process, or a different point in the factory. But as far as robotics go, you're creating jobs. You're not taking jobs away. The skill level that's required in today's world is nothing like what it used to be. It's fun. It's truly enjoyable to pat yourself on the back and say, I did that.
Just like you said, you're creating a higher skilled employee. It's not somebody that's just sitting there grinding away on a part. It's somebody that can read an electrical drawing, can look at the programs, can troubleshoot the mechanical side of everything. And that's, bringing us as a country up higher in our employable personnel.
Well, and I like to tell stories. Well, I've had a unique experience this year. A longtime customer, one of the largest OEM machine builders in the state of Indiana, who I've worked with the individual I've worked with for 25 years, the company I've worked with for 25 years. He wasn't always at that company. We started brainstorming ideas on how to, differentiate their business. They primarily focus on motor assembly, motor winding. They do large general automation lines. And he kept hearing about Cobots. So we had lunch one day, and he's like, well, I should probably just buy a robot, and we'll start telling our customers to use these instead. And I'm like, no, please don't do that. Don't buy a robot from me.
Right.
I really did, because that wasn't a good plan. Well, through a longer story, we came to the conclusion there was an opportunity to do finishing and deburring and cutting, anything that was going to have like circular interpolation, that type of thing. So here we are 6 months later, they've got a developed system with tool changers, easy to use programming. The vice president of the company wrote the program in his spare time because they're having a booming year for their stuff that's build to print. And then he called me last week and he goes, I can't do this anymore, Jeff. I have a job, but I'm getting we've got like 20 people, including BPI, that we've referred to him. He's like, I can't keep up. I need a guy. I just happen to have a young man that is my son's best friend, and he never went to college, but he went into the Air Force. He's in the Air National Guard now. He's really, he works on the A-10s. He's, fixing them and that type of thing. And Eric used to be in the Air Guard. So I'm like, man, why don't you talk to Caleb? Caleb started this week. He's going to be their robotics expert. He'll be at he's done the online training that you mentioned, which anybody can do. He's going to come down to NEFF for a factory level 2-day training. And that young man in a year is going to be a robot engineer. And he didn't have to go to college because he just doesn't want to go to college. And there's a lot of kids that can't or don't want to do school. And here we're going to have this young man who's going to probably have a 6-figure income in a couple of years, and a skill set and pride and all the things you talked about. And that touches me because Eric's one of my oldest customers. Caleb's like a son to me. And I was in a fortunate position to put those two together, but we have all these people out there that didn't want to go to college. I didn't want to go to college. My wife made me. I struggled through for 10 years and got done. But they're smart and they're talented, and we can train them to do automation versus loading a machine. And I think the companies that recognize that and think outside the box are the companies that are going to be prospering, and the companies that continue to put their head in the sand and do the business the way they always have are probably going to struggle. And it's going to come to a point where you're so far behind you're not going to catch up.
Well, even the large OEMs, like the Gilmans back in the day, when you went onto a job site, putting in, multi-million-dollar assembly lines, the person you relied on was the worker. It wasn't, the management. It wasn't the engineers running around. It was like, okay, well, how did you do this prior to this line?
Yeah.
And they would say, well, if you hold it like this, or if you move it like this, and all the tricks would come out, and then you would take those tricks and apply them to what you had. And it just, no matter, if it was Nebraska, if it was California, if it was Arizona, Michigan, find that person that ran that operation.
I had a mobile robot call earlier this year, and the company makes refrigerators, and they wanted to be able to get the refrigerators into the leak testing area. And they thought that they were pushing them. These are kind of industrial refrigerators, but what the wheels on those things are like? Can you imagine a 5'1", 120-pound woman trying to push those things? So the engineer had the bright idea that we couldn't tunnel under them, so that was a problem. But it was great that he called us in, but the young lady comes up and says, you can't put a robot in here. This is explosion proof. She knew it, he didn't. Now, I'm not picking on the engineer, but she knew it, and I started talking to her. If I owned the company, she would not be doing leak tests. That young lady, so you go and you talk to these people that have that tribal knowledge, and then you empower them with some automation or some skill sets, and all of a sudden you've got the best employee you've ever had who's never going to leave.
Yeah, they've lost.
And I see that over and over again, guys, and it's, I can't, my wife keeps reminding me I can't save the world. So I'm going to try not to, but maybe one robot at a time. So
Well, I think Jeff Graham and Jeff Reed, I think you both had examples of jobs that were created really because Batesville Products didn't have a robotics engineer until you came on board here, and it became a key thing for us. But I think that the main thing that Jeff Schmidt was mentioning here was not only redeploying these people in different areas, but really making a stronger workforce as a country and as a even a state or a county or a city. You're making more skilled labor out there. And as much as somebody wants to do an easy task, I think everybody could appreciate the fact that it's making them smarter people. It's making a smarter workforce out there.
Yeah. And then the other thing is a lot of people think that these robots are only for bigger companies. In my previous work experience, I've put countless robots into people's garages, literally in their backyard pole barns. Somebody had the bright idea to machine a part or make a small fixture for somebody, and they buy one of these robots and they put it to work. It was machining, it was a componentry bicycle bicycles. You may buy a piece of equipment to support your hobby.
Mhm.
And these people said, well, man, I could take this hobby that I have and make this widget that everybody needs, but it's not that big of a component for your major manufacturers to bring it on. So you can easily pick one of these up, put it in your garage with your small Bridgeport or any other piece of equipment, and now you're servicing your small niche market with automation.
Is it okay if I speak a little bit on the mobile robots? real quick?
Yeah. That's what I was gonna say.
So this is our mobile robot line that NEFF represents. This is MIR, Mobile Industrial Robots. They're the sister company to Universal Robots, owned by the same parent company. And this has been a little longer time to figure out for us. We've had this line for about 5 years, and I think we in the industry are really starting to figure out where these belong. But I'm sure people on this call have fork truck drivers in their facilities, and they have people pushing carts around. And I'm going to address carts first and fork truck second. But if you got people pushing carts around, I was a co-op at Guardian Glass. I knew where to get lost. I knew where to hide, and so do they. And maybe I'm being mean, but let's keep those people at the machine being productive, and let the robot come and pick up the part or bring out the next piece of the next raw material. So that's an easy one. That's probably 2/3 of our projects these days. Fork trucks are the other thing. We're not going to replace your fork trucks back in your warehouse. We're not going to load trucks. We're not going to load wrappers. But what we can do is get your fork trucks out of your facilities, because fork truck accidents are the #1 accident in the United States right now.
Yeah, you're right.
And they're expensive. The trucks are expensive. They're, the kids, the young people, the old people, whoever, they drive them like they're Indy 500 car racers. They beat the hell out of them. They cost money to maintain. Those people are usually your highest paid employees. So you take it's kind of hard to see, but that little robot there that's actually looks like a small World War I tank with a pallet on top of it. Maybe you've got your operators loading the pallet with the finished goods. The robot comes in, picks it up, drives it out to the warehouse, drops it on another platform. And then the fork truck drivers stay in the warehouse and they can load the truck or do whatever. So they call these collaborative robots. Again, everybody has a definition. To me, I would tell you, more importantly, it's disruptive technology. It's stuff that wasn't available a few years ago, and it's labor savings.
Well,
or labor redeployment.
it was available 30 some years ago.
Just not very good.
It wasn't very good, no.
Yeah,
the fly-by-wire. You have the wire in the floor, and now we have GPS systems. We have magnets in the floor.
These do not require
no magnets.
No magnets.
It's all GPS.
They use LiDAR and camera systems. So you walk around your facility, it's taking images both with a 2D camera and with laser sensors, and picking up on key components in your facility and keys off of that.
Yeah, so what's really cool about that, what he just mentioned, is as it drives around your facility, put it in teach mode, it creates a map. So it creates a map of your floor, so it has all of your aisles documented and whatnot, and that's the software, right? You use that map as your software. There are no more lines in the ground that it has to follow. So you can put the points on the map where you want it to go and tell it what action you want it to do when it gets to that point. It's kind of like a Google map. And if something in your environment changes over time, you can reteach it and create that map over again. So it's really cool technology.
And depending on what the change is, it does not need to be, retaught, where the magnets in the floors or the follow the wire AGV applications, if somebody puts a barrel or a pallet in its way, it's going to pull up to that and it's going to stop.
It stops.
And you're done till that gets moved.
Yeah, and they all back up behind each other.
Where these, you give it a definition of how much it can deviate, and it has a preferred path that it wants to take. But if somebody does leave a pallet in its way, it's going to come up to that and recalculate to go around said object, and then the next time it comes back through that path, it's going to take its preferred path again.
We called it the marketplace. That was the buzzword we used, was the marketplace.
They still use that quite a bit, yeah.
And they're great for that.
Yeah,
they're great for replenishing the marketplace.
That's right.
Interesting.
So next thing is a demonstration now. This robot's been ongoing, but you know, I'd like you guys to actually talk a little bit more about what it's doing and what you can have it do.
Yeah, so something that we haven't discussed yet, which I think is one of the coolest things about the robot, is it's a very fast growing robot industry. It might be the fastest growing robot industry. So every other company has taken notice, and there's a lot of third-party companies that have started to develop product-specific parts or end-of-arm tools for their universal robot specifically. Whether it's a gripper like this, you can see it mounts directly onto the robot. Vacuum systems, sanders, any kind of finishing. So we call that our ecosystem. So it's got this ecosystem of different products from third-party companies specifically for the universal robot, for whatever your application may be. So if you have a specific task you needed to do, but you aren't really sure how to design or make end-of-arm tools, odds are there's something already out there for this robot that you can take advantage of.
Yeah, there's a bunch of tools available out there. There's a lot of tools.
Yeah, and like Jeff said, this is an off-the-shelf product. You can see on the camera.
Yep.
It's got a quick connect plug. The plug on the robot is a standard interface, and you load a template into the robot controller, and it knows then all of the criteria of this end-of-arm tooling. This is a servo motor in here. Then I can give it criteria based on the position for open and close. Depending on my part style, I can give it the speed that I want it to open and close, and then I can also have it look at the force. So if I want to close until I see a certain force, and that's how I know I have a part accurately gripped, that will allow you the ability to have parts that have flash on it that aren't exactly the same every time. So I could take this finger and, if I grow the flash by a couple millimeters, I don't want to have to program it. And when I pick up part A, it's got a little bit more flash or less flash, and now I'm dropping the part or not getting an accurate finish on it. Where if we let the robot and the tooling detect that with its force sensors that's built in, we can get a better finish. This robot has force sensors built into every joint, so we can use that to apply a certain amount of force on, say, sanding or polishing equipment to have a even removal of product, and that's going to increase the life of your belts, the life of your motors, and get a accurate finish every time. And that is a standard feature with the force sensing on here.
This is something that happened here at BPI. I scheduled a long weekend, and you remember this.
Oh, yeah.
So we have a robot in a crate, and word went out that we're going to install the robot while you're gone. Okay. By golly, they did.
Did they let you come back?
I had
We came in the back door.
Yeah.
I'm waiting here.
But truly easy. The UR caps or the templates that Jeff was speaking about, amazing that you can take a high-tech device, hook it up to the end of the robot, and load the software off of a USB thumb drive, and you're operational in 15 minutes.
And if you don't mind, I'll speak to this, because I think we have people from all over the country, if I'm not mistaken, or even greater parts unknown. So a typical interaction with the customer, and I wasn't here. This is the first time I've been here. So the team was obviously here. Maybe you brought Carrie, or you did it yourself.
Yeah.
Look at you. If you have interest in these technologies, the best way to find your local distributors is the way we find everything these days, over Google.
Yeah.
A typical process is we would come in and we would just meet with you, and we can look around your facility and see. We kind of call it a site survey. Or we can come in and we can bring a robot in and we can do a presentation and a demo. And a lot of times we'll put the pendant in the owner or the plant manager's hands, because everybody gets a kick out of that to see him program it. But it's again, if you're going to take that leap of faith, this is a robot we can literally bring into your facility, set it up on your table, just like we have here, put the software up on the screen and let everybody see what it looks like to program. Again, walking the floor, looking for low-hanging fruit, looking for your first application where you can have a quick win. And we've just done this over and over and over again. And I'll tell you what, if 10 customers look at it, 3 of them end up with a robot. And it's usually because the other 7 maybe just didn't have the right application or weren't ready to take that risk. But then of those 7, we usually get a call back from another 3, right, Jeff? It might be in 3 years or 5 years or whatever. So don't be afraid to reach out and ask for a demo or ask for a visit. That's what we get paid to do. We don't charge for it. I like to tell people I'm the most expensive consultant you'll never pay for. Yeah.
Well, and
yeah.
You know, we're in the foundry post-processing machining, but there's welding applications.
Oh, absolutely. End-of-line palletizing is huge.
Palletizing.
If you got a person picking up boxes and putting them on a pallet at the end of the line, that is I'm not trying to be judgmental, but that's the biggest waste of the human being.
Oh yeah, it's ergonomic.
We can set up if it's slower payload, we have some collaborative robots that'll do it. If it's larger payload, there's some very easy to use 6-axis systems that'll do it. But palletizing, welding, finishing, dispensing, inspection, but machine tending was the big hit early on. I mean, we were all of a sudden getting calls from all these machine tending companies that we'd never done business with before because they didn't use automation, and they were 50% of our business early on. It was replacing the operator. It was really opening the door, loading and unloading parts, closing the door, and it was pushing the button. You didn't even have to have an electrical interface between it, and we did that quite a bit.
We did.
Before we found people that knew how to do the electrical interfaces.
Absolutely. Depends on the brand of CNC.
Well, we've renovated some that were really old and nobody had the PLC program, or whatever the controller was. Or they lock it down.
So Jeff's and Tim, appreciate you guys' time today. We did have a couple questions come across. Have one from Mary. So what's your favorite robot application, or what application stands out the most to you that you may have seen in your career?
It would be a recent past life. 3 robots in a cell. 1 huge robot tending pallets and trays, and 2 small robots aided by vision picking and placing to said pallets or from trays to pallets, vice versa. Some of the numbers that were thrown out in earlier in our conversation was $1 million robot cell. Truly, this was a $1 million robot cell, and pretty slick. It was the engineering was superb on this one, and these actually been in operation for over a decade.
Wow.
Still operating to this day. So that's my favorite application.
Very cool. That's you.
For me, I love every time I see it. It's 3D bin picking.
Okay.
So you've got a tote of parts or a box of parts and a 3D camera overhead, and you're basically taking a 3D image of what's inside that tote, and it sends coordinates back to the robot, and it can go in and actually grab parts that are all, barrel of monkeys inside of a tote and pull one out and place it exactly where it's supposed to be. Very cool application. It's my all-time favorite.
Awesome. Jeff?
Unfortunately, he stole mine. I've, done quite a few different applications, from dispensing, machine tending, 3D bin picking, spot welding. I said, so 3D bin picking is a pretty cool application.
Okay.
It is not a cheap application, and, but it is the future of doing this. I mean, to save yourself a bowl feeder or different componentry on your floor, real estate is always expensive. It is, the future.
Let me show my age here. I'm sorry. There was a company years ago, probably 35 years ago, by the name of Megamation. They were out of New Jersey. And for anybody out there that's not familiar with air hockey, there's this game where you have a puck travel on a cushion of air. Now picture that with 4 robot heads on a upside down air hockey game, and the robot heads are held in place by magnetism and then travel by electromotive force on a cushion of air. And they have, in this rectangle, robot 1 has a corner, 2, 3, and 4 has a corner, and you assign a work zone to it. And they travel literally by electromotive force on a cushion of air. And that was not my favorite application, but that was a pretty slick one. 4 heads battling each other.
Since everybody stole your.
No, actually, they didn't. And it doesn't necessarily, I don't know that it applies to the foundry industry, but I think it applies to the general conversation. And the two are the two that we're having the most growth with. And one is collaborative weld assisting, and the other is the end-of-line palletizing. Those have been our two biggest growth areas this year. And, you know, I've had to pick boxes up off a line and put them onto a pallet for a living, you know, when I was in college. And I'm, you know, and we didn't have earbuds back then. So, you know, and,
Right.
you know, and it was boring. And I'm ADD, man. So you stick me on a job like that and I'm going nuts. That's been a big one. But the welding one, I think, really emphasizes so I've got, again, personal, when things are personal, they mean more to you. And I've got a number of my son's friends that have gone into welding, and almost every single one of them is not welding anymore because of the fumes and the heat and the hours. And, you know, I live up in Angola, Indiana, and there's a huge manufacturer up there. And every time I turn a corner, they've got a sign out looking for welders. And I bring this up because if you know anybody that needs welders and they haven't automated, it's probably because they're running small pieces. They're not running 1,000 parts a day every day of the week. And most people think they can't automate that. And that is where we really shine because, again, we get the welder out of the mask. Well, he's still got to wear a mask, but he's not inhaling fumes. He's not bent over. And, you know, my wife's a physical therapist, so she tells me about what the welders look like when they're in their 40s. And I don't want my kids, these are my kids,
Right, yeah.
I don't want anybody to have to go through that. So I think, you know, where we can help people have a better life, and yet what happens with these collaborative welders are, we still have the operator, but he's now 4 times as productive as he used to be. And so if you could spend $100 grand and make your welder 4 times more productive, to me, that's a pretty quick ROI. But again, that scales to anything you might be doing. It could be machine tending, it could be polishing, deburring, anything where we get a person out of that physically difficult job.
Absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
I got one pick. So I just going back to the 3D bin picking. How flexible is that?
Okay, so there's different technologies out there. Actually, Universal Robots has their own, and it's very unique. And here's why. So typically, when you're doing a 3D bin picking application, you have to teach all of these different entry points and exit points to get in and out of the barrel or out of the box. With UR's product, it does that automatically in the controller. It'll take the image and it calculates internally what direction the robot has to go in to pick it up and what direction it has to go to drop the part off. It does all that for you. All those calculations are done. So you don't have to spend the time to figure all that out, which is why I love that product. Yeah.
And that has saved so much time because in the older days, with someone that you guys know, the C word, you would have to literally teach the different orientations that that part could be in.
That's right.
And then some intelligence existed, but nothing like what's available now. You would have to do the thinking for it.
Well, and Teradyne bought a company that nobody'd ever heard of, but they did a lot of motion control, you know, servo, you know, multi-axis motion control for another company most of us have heard of called NASA. So they were doing NASA's motion control for the rovers and all the other things, and they bought this company. And to Jeff's point, they took their motion, you know, their motion background and can create, you know, so they're basically guiding the robot. Instead of just sending coordinates and then having the robot figure out how to get there, they're literally guiding it through the whole process, which is what allows us to actually reach into the bin and get more parts. That's right. Now I want to be clear. I love bin picking as much as the next person. It's still a work in process. Yeah. So if you have a project, we're going to lose early. We're always happy to look at it, but we turn down more than we take. But it gets better every year.
It depends on the part.
And we've I'm not going to say the numbers because the numbers don't seem big, but our business in that area has quadrupled this year, and I expect it to quadruple again next year because and every month they're coming out with a new software update. It's going to get there to where
there's limitations because the part,
there's always limitations.
You know, if you're picking at an ID and that part is setting 90 degrees from you, you know, that's, how's it gonna pick up that feature?
Right.
You can teach that and you can, but then now you're going longhand, you've got to come in at this approach.
We don't do any bin picking applications until we've done it in our lab and we've taken a video or you've come in and seen it. It's not something, you know, whereas if you said, hey, I want to do machine tending, okay, here's a UR10 part number, place an order.
Yeah.
You know, so it's, but to Jeff and Jeff's point, it's Jeff and Jeff and Jeff and Jeff and Tim and Tim. It's the future and it's the holy grail, really. When we really nail it, it's going to become huge because there's just so many people sitting there. Again, all these operations were designed for people, and people are really good at bin picking.
Yeah, until they pick the wrong bin. and
Well,
But that's where we talk about the whole ecosystem.
Indicator lights, you've got barcode scanners, you have traceability. Oh, yeah. That's
Automation is repeatable. If you teach it right, it's going to do it right. We're not. I can hit my 9-iron 130 yards and nail the middle of the green, and the next time I shank it in the leg. And it was 10 minutes apart. But a robot would hit that 9-iron the same distance every time unless you tweak the acceleration. So it's the same in your factories. It's just it's using them where they matter and then using the people for what they can do so much better.
And when you're new to it, like Jeff said, that's what we're here for.
Tim's trying to wrap us up.
Yeah, you know, I was gonna say, I think,
Let's see that cue thing.
we could talk forever about this, especially with the knowledge and the experience we have in this room today. You know, did want to reiterate, I appreciate everybody for all your questions that did come across. If anything wasn't answered, we are, you know, cutting it close here at the end. We'll make sure we get it answered offline here. But, you know, make sure you check out, there's been a multitude of webinars that Batesville Products has put on in the past. Feel free to check out the YouTube page or go directly to the website to check those out. Everybody will be receiving a PowerPoint and video document following this webinar today. And we really appreciate everybody for joining us. Thanks, Jeff and Tim.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Very good. Excellent. I knew it.